Hello, welcome to the New Stack Makers, where we talk about at-scale application development, deployment, and management. Thank you for joining us. It's PagerDuty Summit here in San Francisco. It's muggy, but to me, let me tell you, it's beautiful. It's always beautiful for me here at the Embarcadero. We're at Pier 27, covering the events here at PagerDuty Summit. The theme here is Ops Reimagined. Notice I didn't say DevOps Reimagined, but Ops as in short for Operations Reimagined. How are we streamlining operations processes to make it possible for development teams and operation teams to collaborate and deliver better value to the customers? This edition of the New Stack Makers is sponsored by PagerDuty, maker of the Digital Operations Management Platform. DOM combines incident management with machine learning and advanced analytics to empower operations teams to respond to their networks and their applications before things go wrong. Download the 2017 State of Digital Operations Report now and see how IT operations teams stack up against the expectations of their customers at PagerDuty, PagerDuty.com. So, how do we integrate the emerging world of microservices with its distributed services complexity with the emerging cultural shift, again, in DevOps? What the theme of this conference here is Ops Reimagined. How do we bridge the two worlds? I brought a man who probably knows more about the answer to that question than just about anyone alive.
Aw, shucks.
Adam Jacob, CEO of Chef.
CTO of Chef.
I did say
CTO, not a you. Did you say?
Did I say Chief Technology Officer?
Indeed.
Of Chef, and if I said CEO, my apologies, but my apologies to the CEO of Chef.
Right? Somewhere Barry Chris is like, seriously?
I have promoted, this just in, I've promoted Adam. See, we can do anything in this new world of microservices,
right.
Roles shift. We can make the T.
It's eventually consistent. Later you'll learn that transaction did not go through. But for now, it's cool.
Another transaction that will not go through will come to me in the mail in a pink form. Anyway, Adam, good to have you here.
Thank you.
And you just delivered a superb talk downstairs to an admiring crowd, one of whom is T.C. Curry, who probably has a lot of questions to ask right offhand.
Well, I'm interested because we talked to Jennifer Tejada earlier today, and she's talking about it's not just technology, but the shift is people. So I'm downstairs listening to you talk about the future of DevOps, and it's all about people.
Yeah.
I mean, you talked almost nothing about technology except a little bit here and there dropped in.
Yes.
And I love that.
Thanks.
So I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about it because I was a history major, and so the idea of telling stories is just something that's really ingrained into me, and I love bringing that whole idea into tech. And the way you remember things is by telling a story about it.
Right. Yeah, we don't remember. Yeah, we don't remember. Most people don't remember in great detail, right? We remember the story, and the story evolves over time. It mutates, you know. You sort of knead it like bread. I think the thing about technology is that, for the most part, the technology that we've been building for a long time hasn't been doing a super good job of serving us as human beings. Right? If we think about the difficulties we have with it, if we think about the things we build, like there are certain technologies that have evolved far enough that they are really well in service of humans. I think when we think about most of the IT systems we build, when we think about the production technology we build in general, it's not very good at it.
No.
And it's because we built it as technology first. We didn't actually build it in service of the humans, all the humans who are connected to that technology, both as consumers, but also as developers, as operations people, as security folks. Like, we don't think about the impacts of our choices on all of the humans that are connected to that technology, and we definitely don't think about it as a narrative.
Right.
Where that technology we build is going to go out into the world and have an impact on those human beings.
So you think we're not inspired by human need so much as technological void filling?
Yeah, basically.
much.
I think what we I think most of what we like is it's easier to talk about technology void filling, right? It's easy to talk about like I built configuration management software, right? And I'm under no illusions that I built the last configuration management system on the planet, right? Luke Knies, who built Puppet, wasn't under that illusion, I think. Or if he wasn't as soon as I built Chef, right? and then Michael DeHaan built Ansible, right? And there'll be someone else. That Ansible's not the last configuration management system that will be written in the world. One problem with that model is that in general, what we're doing is improving on the technology as it was understood, not saying, hey, with all the things we've learned as human beings about technology, about how to build good things, about technology that services us as humans, well, what can we reinvent what configuration management is? Could we reinvent what application deployment is? Could we, how would we build those systems in a way that are better for the humans who use them? Instead, we ask the question, how can I find a market niche? Or we say, how can I find can I disrupt an industry? Or how can I, there's a lot of things we say, but very rarely, other than in marketing rhetoric, everybody has their rhetoric.
Right.
I do too, so I'm not immune from this, but do we talk about people? When we're talking about technology, when we're developing the software, we don't talk about them, right?
Well,
other than in the most abstract form.
Right, and so many companies, you have to argue to get a UI, UX design team in.
Yeah.
And it's the users at the end that are going to make or break your software at the end of the day.
Yes.
So yeah, I did software design for a while and created software.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of data entry, so when I sat down, I was asking the people who were doing the data entry, it's like, what do you want? Because
Right.
I don't care where these 8 pieces of information show up on the screen, but I know it makes a huge difference to you at the end.
Right.
And that's actually what made me successful. People
Yes.
were shocked that I asked.
Domain-driven design.
Yes.
Why is that interesting? Why is it a thing? And
Right.
the answer is that we spend all of our time not talking to humans. That whole book
Right.
and all of the incredible patterns it teaches you, and they are incredible, is basically saying, go talk to people who know what's going on, listen to the words that come out of their mouth, and design a system that's reflective of those words and of
Right.
that ubiquitous language we share.
Right.
And I think the future of DevOps, when we talk about it, the reason I talk about it as so much about people and not about technology is that when we talk about it, just when we lead with technology, we wind up arguing about technology. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We just go directly to implementation, and we're like, well, I don't like this implementation detail, or I don't like this nit, or I don't like this, and that's all fine, but it doesn't get to the point of how is it going to be fundamentally different than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago?
Right.
Now, wait a minute, because you and I, and you and Alex Williams, our new Stack colleague, have talked about Chef and Habitat.
Yes, of course.
And about essentially how Habitat brings the configuration management model to a more declarative system in which you're fulfilling the needs of the broader system rather than just the needs of the machine. So
Yes.
we have talked about that.
Absolutely.
And fulfilling a different needs model. That said, we are always going to have a need for something that fulfills a configuration management.
Of course you will.
We're going to need something that says, how do I respond as a machine to the dynamic needs, dynamic and changing needs of the consumers, of the customers, the people using my service? It can't be wrong to be thinking in that direction, can it?
It's not wrong to be thinking in that direction, but look, if it's a question of what's your goal. Is if our goal is transformation, is a fundamentally different place than where we are today. If where you start is by staring at isn't about humans. So Habitat is a good example. I spent a year doing R&D, and most of what I did was talk to human beings. I was out asking people how it should work. I was looking for where it was hard, and it took forever to build. And the reason was because I wanted it. I didn't want to just build something that was a little bit better for application deployment. I wanted to build something that felt transformative to it. That when people heard it, and they heard what I had built, I wanted their reaction to be I don't think it can work that way. which I get a lot.
You wanted that reaction.
Well, look, I would be better if they were like, I believe you, you know? So like, for the record, like I don't want that reaction forever. But yeah, like if I described it to someone and they immediately were like, oh, I completely get everything you just said, and the design is exactly what I would have expected, then the odds that I built you something transformatively different are zero.
Right.
You know, like if all I had done was be like, yeah, it's like Docker, only faster.
So you're judging.
It's not better.
You're judging. You're gauging how much you rock the boat. In other words, and if you didn't feel like you've rocked it enough, then the good news is you've met expectations. The bad news is you haven't done anything by way of change.
I mean, maybe I get to disrupt you, but let's not kid ourselves. Mostly what I'm going to do is disrupt you by selling whatever you do at a third of the price. Right? Or or whatever it is we do. Like our business model is what drives it. So like, you know, if you're Nginx right now and you saw the Envoy presentation from here at the PagerDuty Summit earlier today, you should be really nervous because they've taken a bunch of your core customer features and they've said that the value of them is $0. And like that, and the question to ask there is like, did Envoy fundamentally change the game from a human technology perspective about what we can build? I don't know that it did. Did it disrupt the business model of everyone who thought that they were going to be able to build a business on top of L7 smart load balancing that's distributed to the edge? Hell yeah, they did, right? So like maybe it's also transformative for us as human beings, and maybe that's going to build us a better future. Maybe it won't. For sure, it's disruptive to the business model. And like I think separating those two kinds of disruption apart and saying, are we building systems that are fundamentally better to operate, better to build, more humane to deal with on the day-to-day? I don't know if Envoy meets that or not because I've never run it, but that's the kind of thing I'm talking about.
So it sounds to me like as if you're saying that the goal for individuals in your position, and maybe to some extent in mine, should not always be to please the customer, because if you're doing that, you're only meeting expectations but not moving them to a new place. You think the goal should be, okay, you're going to be a little disappointed with me or a little disgusted with me for a temporary period of time while I move you to a new plateau you've never been before.
Yeah, if you're not a little uncomfortable, then what have I done? Like how much better have I made it? You know? And look, there may be a lot of.
I'd love to be able to put that on my tombstone. If I haven't made you uncomfortable, what have I done?
Like just a little bit. Like I don't want to make you a lot uncomfortable, but a little. You think about it, like every great piece of technology that's come into your life for a minute made you uncomfortable. You were like, oh, I don't know about this. Like the iPhone. When I first got an iPhone, I was like, I don't know if this is better than my Trio is. Like my Trio can do a lot, and I have all this data in it, and it was kind of this like closed ecosystem. But man, that touchscreen was really nice, and then the App Store came along, and you're like, oh, yeah, I get it, way better than my Trio, you know. But it was uncomfortable for a second there, and I don't know if you remember, but like there was this whole wave of like keyboard doubters.
I was too young. I'm sorry.
Yes.
You know, people forget though. But like there was like a legit counterculture that was like, we'll never pry my physical keyboard from my cold dead hands or whatever. You know.
Totally.
Yeah, I went to an to an AT&T store in Columbus, Indiana on the day the iPhone premiered, and I took pictures of the people standing in line outside the store with whatever phones they had at the time.
Right.
And they were texting each other on their BlackBerry, and they were extending their antenna and saying, okay, if I stood this way, could.
Yeah.
And I would think that these people already were uncomfortable to some extent, but they just didn't realize that they were. They didn't realize the extent of how uncomfortable they were until they started moving apps up and down and sideways and seeing them pop in and out and watch things behave and say, wow.
An analogy that I don't know is, I don't know your audience, but like if you think about it.
I don't know my audience.
It's like
either.
Everybody's sort of comfortable in, like we're standing at a certain degree of poop. And as long as
degree of
poop, like you're in a pit.
You said exactly what I thought you said.
And in the pit is poop, and we're standing in it. And as long as the poop doesn't go over my head, like I'm basically fine. Do you see what I mean? Like I can be comfortable. It's kind of warm, and like it's poop, and I know it, but it's fine. And everybody who had that cell phone was like, yeah, it sucks. I have.
And the old joke: if you're warm and happy in a pile of poop, keep your mouth shut. Is that
exactly? And so that's what we're all doing all the time.
I should have taken that advice a long time ago.
And you know.
But something you talked about in your presentation just now is there's a difference. I mean, there's complexity, and you have to get very comfortable with complexity.
Yes.
But also, the next step is things are getting easier. So what happens, and I've been seeing this over the last year, is you have this split between the engineers who are creating the complexity behind the scenes. So the engineers that are coding everything that works on the iPhone, and the people that are putting all that together so your customers have things that are really easy. But there's this enormous amount of complexity behind the scenes. And what Jennifer announced today is exactly that, and that's what machine learning is all about. There's enormous complexity behind the scenes, but when you sit down at that incident screen, you have 2 or 3 things, and you open it up, and all of the information is there.
But that enormous complexity is, forgive me, the pile of poop that we're all sitting in right now is the enormous complexity.
Yes, but
this is where we dive.
But you'll never remove the complexity from the system.
Yeah.
Like the complexity is
Right.
necessary.
Right.
But Habitat is both the most complicated piece of software I've ever written by an order of magnitude, and
Right.
also the easiest to use by a similar order of magnitude.
Right.
And that's not a coincidence.
And that is its
But-
brilliance, actually, if you think about it.
Yeah.
But the key is that the engineers need to stand in the poop because we're in the complexity, right? But you don't have to drag your customers there anymore.
Exactly. To me, like when I work inside of Habitat, it doesn't feel like poop.
Right.
Because that's where I sit in the stack. Like my job is the building of that thing. It feels great. Like it's not perfect, and I'm refactoring it, and I'm working that code, and it's
Right.
alive, and like it has its own personality, and it's a thing. But but my customers shouldn't feel that way, right?
Right.
And very often we inflict that upon each other, especially in operations and software development. Like,
Right.
we suffer inferior experiences all
Right.
the time. IT. When you think about IT delivery in a
Right.
large enterprise, and then you think about that iPhone in your pocket, tell me how much longer traditional IT gets to live.
Right.
Because at some point, every trope they have to tell you you can't have nice things, like your whole life screams at you that it's a lie.
Mm-hmm.
Like every time you pick out your phone and you're like, oh look, I installed Slack. Boop. Like that IT guy who's like, you can't have that for a month. You're like, like,
Yeah.
for now, I'll give it to you. Like, I'll give you grace, and I'll be like, sure, it's complicated. But, like, will I give it to you for 5 years?
No.
No way. Not
No.
a chance.
Right.
Because everything in your life tells you it doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
But that IT guy, let's face it, there's legitimate concerns there. It's not that the IT person is stomping on Slack because it's new and it's shiny. It's because it's untested.
Sure, but hiding inside there is the human collaboration and ease of use problem. So like that the idea that we don't have to build a system that would allow us to accept that level of variance and manage it safely. Like everything you just said is about how can I ensure that Slack is safe? How can I ensure that I can inject this thing into my organization?
Mm-hmm.
And every single piece of the system was not built to make that safe. Instead, it was built to keep it out. Right? It was built to say,
Right.
oh, the way we're going to keep all these people safe is by slowing everything down and not allowing anything in. And
Right.
and that is a fundamentally inhumane system. Like, it's
Right.
literally building a wall.
Right.
And unshockingly, we don't like it. And so human beings will route around it, which they are doing in droves. And so either we figure out a new model of IT that allows for that stuff to actually flourish and be managed in a way that matters, which in order to be safe will require a complete rethinking of the entire delivery stream.
And this talks also to your point about the future is in teams. And I've
Yes.
heard this from Atlassian's futurist dude, Don Price, and various other places, is the individual IT team is no longer siloed. It's not, there's communication is of paramount importance across teams, across all businesses, as all businesses become software businesses. John Deere just bought a software
Right.
company. So, you want to talk about all businesses, it's like, farm equipment is now a software
The
business.
incredibly interconnected combine
Right.
that does automatic reordering of parts and maintenance and can deal with like seed reordering too.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy.
Yeah,
Crazy.
yeah,
Yeah.
But it's all about teams. It's all about teamwork. And that's
Yeah.
not something that traditional IT departments have had a whole lot of, say, training in.
None. Alaska Airlines has the 30-second rule, where their goal is that every single thing you do in the experience of getting on a plane and getting to your destination you should never have to stop for more than 30 seconds. So drop off your bag should take 30 seconds. Getting through security should take 30 seconds. Getting from the time the plane lands to gets to the gate should be 30 seconds. From the time that it's at the gate and the door is open is 30 seconds, right?
Wow.
And if you think about the level of teamwork that's required across all of those systems to make that work, that's a very audacious goal. That's a really big goal. And that would cascade through the design of every system you have, right?
Right.
But if you think about it, part of the glory of that as a goal is it's so human. You're every single person can just be yeah, yes, of course, I want to get off of the airplane in 30 seconds. Of course I do. I hate standing in that airplane.
Right.
The difference of that, Schiphol Airport has this automated baggaging system that theoretically allows you to drop your bags on the conveyor belt yourself. But in order to do it, you have to put your bag in a particular way. So it has to be turned sideways with a little tag in the upper right-hand side. Otherwise, the automated machine can't read the tag.
Right.
And none of us go to Schiphol often enough to know that that's the shape. And so they built this amazing system that should have been really fast. But now, for every automated machine, there's 2 to 1. There's a butler who stands at the automated machine, and all he does is turn the bags every time. And that system had a good idea. Make it faster to get your bag strapped off.
Right.
Didn't think about the humans at all.
Right.
Because if you thought about the humans involved in that system, you'd have immediately been except I don't know how to put my bag in sideways. Anyway.
Right.
But the very human characteristics of safety and security arguably are states. They're states of being. They may be states of mind, but they are states.
Sure.
And the attainment of these things typically requires that everything converge toward a standardized set of circumstances that make us feel safe and secure, which I would argue is why systems are designed to keep change out, at least at first, because we don't know what change will do. We don't know if it's slack or sluck or struck. We don't know what it's going to do. It's new. That's all we need to know to say that by default, if I introduce new into a system, that's unsafe. And any safety and security engineer is going to tell me that that's the way it should be, that we should not trust new by default.
That's because we didn't design the system from the ground up to accept change. We built technical systems like we're living in the legacy of DARPA. We're living in the there's an unbroken design chain from Grace Hopper to here. And that was not her problem.
Right.
And
Admiral, if you're watching from above.
Yes, if you remember, you did great. But it's not because it's fundamentally impossible to create a system whereby that could be safe, and where the boundaries of that injection and who's available to access it and how they can see it, if those were easy to express, we could come up with a system that would be safe. The problems would start to incur when we start being held back by some fundamentals. Example, if you say that you could make a system, Google Spanner is the best example of this. So they built a database that's geographically distributed and transactionally consistent in real time. So that shouldn't be possible in most cases, except for one magic design decision they did, which is they made the network so that it would fail hard only. So any fault at all would cause the component to fail stop. shut down. At which point, now we can build you transactional consistency across a wide system, because I can guarantee that the system only fails hard.
It's the trade-off you need to make in order to be able to achieve that
And
on
now
a
I can
broad
achieve
scale.
that goal.
Right.
But how many companies would be like, sure, I'll build you fail-stop network gear, right?
Yeah.
And it's not for lack of money or smarts. Like, if you're Morgan Stanley, are you telling me you don't have a need or the money to be able to get globally consistent, geo-distributed transactions in a database? I'm pretty sure you super want that.
Yeah.
And the difference is that a Google engineer could. They felt empowered to do it.
But a Morgan Stanley would also have the standby money to invest in something to make sure that whatever that system was, however it makes its trade-off, there would still be some type of state of security, of deciding how long the system can afford not to trust change.
Sure, and that security has to be baked into the system from the beginning. Whereas right now, we bake that security in way late. And so the only way to solve it is to say nothing comes in that I haven't considered, because I consider it by definition late. Because we didn't design the system to say, oh, actually, there's a holistic IT delivery system. That holistic IT delivery system needs to understand the idea of security. What's security mean? Well, it means maybe people or endpoints, or we could make a list, and you could actually design to solve for those problems. Doing it would mean breaking a whole lot of the system, which is precisely what we're going to do over a long enough time horizon.
Right.
We're going to be stuck on this constant treadmill of slightly better implementations and bad outcomes.
But that makes a lot of executives of traditional companies a lot more comfortable.
Heck yeah. Because it's safer.
Right.
I mean, look, it's really bad. This is why, leading insurrections in corporations is a really bad career idea, right? Unless you're going to win. If you're going to come for the king, best not miss.
Right.
And yeah, it's not safer to lead the insurrection. But it's why I think there's an industry problem. It's not that Morgan Stanley has a problem. It's that every engineer has a problem. In that we're not engineering from the correct standpoint in our hearts. Where our work comes from is actually a little flawed.
So how do we make this shift?
I think we talk about it a lot.
Okay.
I think we start highlighting when the outcomes are better.
Right.
And we start pointing out that the technology that's winning, and the reason it's winning, and the reason it's better, is actually because in general it makes for a more humane experience for the people who are using it. We call out where those edges are not humane, and we get comfortable being able to say it, which doesn't mean that the technology is garbage.
Right.
Because most of our technology, all of it, isn't right. And but there's not even a vocabulary for that conversation right now, I think.
But have you envisioned a system in your mind that enables a testing environment that effectively figures out at what time a system is capable of accepting change?
Yes.
If you would putting the change on a treadmill and saying the treadmill is exactly this long, by the time we get to the end of it, the system will be ready for you.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's examples of organizations who basically have that now. What you don't have is that as a generically applicable system that we can use as a building block for generic creativity. Google can build Spanner, which is awesome for Google. Can they ship Spanner? No, they cannot. Right? So what's the model? It's a much harder problem. It's hard to build Facebook, and it's hard to build Google, and it's hard to build those. That's super difficult. Hard to build PagerDuty and Chef. It's an order of magnitude harder problem to say, what is the generic pattern? What's the generic building blocks that would enable regular people to thrive in this place without having to necessarily, get their arm broken like the Model T in the example I used in my talk. And that kind of complexity we haven't built yet.
For people who didn't see the talk, tell me the example you used.
I used the example in talking about simplicity versus complexity. I use the Ford Model T, where it's the simplest car imaginable. But to start it, if you didn't use your left hand and not your thumb, and it backfired, you would break your arm. So most people are right-handed, so right there, most of us would break our arm. But you probably wouldn't even get to a part where the engine could start because all you know is turn the crank because you're a modern person, and the idea that there's 19 steps before you hit the crank wouldn't even occur to you. So like, but the beauty of the Model T was it was simple. So if we had all those parts in a crate and we locked everybody in, and there were guys with guns, would we ever get out of the room? And the answer is absolutely. We would build a working Ford Model T and we would drive it out of this hall. But if you took my Audi and you did the same trick, we die here. You know what I mean? Like, this is it. It's Lord of the Flies. Like, this podcast gets really weird, right? Like, it's all going to end badly.
It's really weird.
You invited me, man. So I think, but yeah, I think that's what happens.
But, and the point is, and I love this analogy because the point is that your Audi has a button that you push.
Starts
you
the
don't
car.
even need a key. It's just a button that you push and boom.
Drive away.
You've got this massive complexity underneath the hood that is not replicable by normal mortals. And you have a push button that allows you to drive the car away. And I think that's where tech is. We're building those buttons.
You're trying to.
We're trying to build buttons.
Yeah. And I think the difficulty in IT and infrastructure is that is we still haven't realized that we're in the Audi car building button business.
Right.
Instead, we believe that we're in the making a better scheduler, or we're making a better configuration management system,
Right.
or we're making a better whatever it is. And in fact, like, no, there's this value chain that takes technology ideas and presents them to users.
Right.
And what is the generic set of building blocks that enable each person in each of those roles to live a good life and to have the same ease of that push button?
Right.
You know, the other example I use is a NASCAR car where they tune the engine in your Ford Fusion. And like, normal people don't tune their Ford Fusion, but you could. The interface is there. You just need the expertise to decide. And we don't build our systems like that.
But you said earlier that the problem of resolving the change mechanism on such a grand scale is order of magnitude greater than what the level of problems that our configuration management systems typically solve today.
Or any system solves
But
today. Yeah.
don't we have to tackle that problem before we can effectively say that we've made that Audi push button for everything and made it work?
Yes, I think that's true, and you'll do it in pieces over time. But like, here's a great technical example: signing into a VPN. So let's just start with why,
Right.
and then let's start with like, what is it you wanted to do? So like, you as a user have access to services inside of some location.
Right.
The VPN is the entry gate that allows you to get to those services.
Right.
It's completely ignorant of what services are behind the VPN. All it does is provide the key to a network. And then like we build all of the wrong abstractions. Whereas like, as a person, wouldn't you like to see a list that says, once you sign into the VPN, I actually have access to the following 15 services. I see the following 5 endpoints, and that what my permission level is inside of them. But I can't give you that because I don't have an abstraction for a service that would even allow me to ask the question.
Right.
And much less
You
a data
can't have
center.
like somebody go into the system for me and say, before I log into the VPN, pretend you're me, go into the, be my proxy, find out what services I can use if you were me.
What would it even be? Like, how do you even ask the question? And it's because the building blocks here was IPv4, and then we needed encryption. Great. Well, let's write some encryption software. Awesome. Okay. I got to sign into the network. How do I get in the network? I will build an encrypted tunnel, and I will sign into the tunnel. What will I use? I will use my username and password. Where is that stored? And like, on and on you go.
Right.
Never did we step back and say, what is it that the humans are trying to accomplish?
Right.
And how would I design a system that allows those humans to accomplish it with ease?
How many years have I I spent signing into VPNs. Oh
You know
my
what I'm talking
God.
about? And wouldn't it be better if you could just go to the site that's secured and it just worked because you have an identity?
My bank now uses my finger.
You know what I'm talking about? Are you Chase?
No,
I'm
no,
Chase,
not
and
Chase.
I use my thumb, and it's my favorite.
Yes, it's. I'm a credit union person, but I open it up in Apple and I put my thumb down and boom, it shows me everything
Changes
I
my
need to
life.
know. You know,
So
it's
good.
So yeah, exactly.
So good.
And that's the human base.
Yeah, why doesn't my IT systems work that way?
Exactly.
My bank would use my finger, but I'd have to cut it off for them first.
Different finger.
The Chief Philosophy Officer of Chef,
Thank you so much.
Adam
Yes.
Jacob.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
me.
Pleasure.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Your tattoo.
Yes.
Can you share with us what that is?
I totally.
means?
Yes, I can. I don't know if you can see it, they're camera guys, but like, it's basically 3 parallel lines. So there was at one point in my life I was religious. I'm not super religious anymore, and the idea of grace and of sin are interesting ones. And David Brooks, who's like a mildly conservative, I mean, depending on your point of view, he's crazy conservative or not at all. Commentator for the New York Times. He wrote a book that I think actually isn't a great book, but I saw him be interviewed by Robert Reich. I swear the story ends, and his book was about the fact that people focus too much on what he calls the resume virtues. So are you good at your job as opposed to the funerary virtues? What do people say about you when you die? Nobody ever comes to your funeral and says, boy, Adam was such a good systems administrator. Like, you probably won't do that.
Right.
You'll remember some fundamentally human thing we did to each other.
Right.
And his supposition was that the reason we struggle that way is that we've lost the ability to talk about morality and about because the vocabulary is gone. We all used to know what grace was and understand the distinction in a religious context. And so he tried to redefine those words in a secular context. And the way he did it was, he said, sin, basically everybody has a stack rank in your head of the things you value and that matter to you as a person. And you want to align your life to that list of values. You know, that's how you want to act. And sin is when your behavior no longer matches that stack rank, right? And which then lets us define grace as the people who know you well enough to understand what that ranking is and love you enough that in the moment they can give you grace for that bad behavior. They can see, yep, I know you well enough to know that who you really are, who you want to be, and the person that you are inside is this other person, and your behavior right now doesn't match that. And I can tell you that,
right?
And I can say it with love in my heart, and I can give you the grace to be that human being. And so when he said those things, I saw this tattoo in my brain, which was, I don't have any other tattoos, and I got it 3 years ago. I'm 40, basically, not yet, but almost. And I just saw 3 lines in my head because I have a wife and a young daughter, and so I was thinking about that stack rank and wanting to like have those things. And so it both reminds me that I have values and I should live by them. It also reminds me that I need to try to understand the humans in my life well enough that I can offer them grace. So I have to search actively to find what someone else's value and list is, and then remember in the moments where what they're doing isn't what I want or feels wrong to me, that I can find a way to give them grace.
That's
feels
wonderful.
to me that when I saw that on your arm, my first thought was that was the stability symbol, the koan in the I Ching.
Yeah.
The 3 lines. What's usually, I think it's referred to as the rock.
It also kind of looks like the hamburger symbol. You know, like when you're like the drop-down menu where you hide all the
So
other
if I were to
menus.
slide it left and right, could I get options?
You get options about my morality.
And I just want to say, we're here with a new stack, and I love that your concept of grace has a stack.
It absolutely does have a stack.
So, with the Chief Theology Officer of Chef,
Yes.
I got that right for once.
Absolutely, you did. Thank you so much.
Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Bye.
From the Embarcadero at Pier 27 in San Francisco with TC Curry and Adam Jacob, I'm Scott Fulton. You've been listening to the New Stack Makers, sponsored today by PagerDuty. Learn how the PagerDuty Foundation supports community programs such as technology career coaching and talent recruitment at pagerduty.org. Listen to more episodes of the New Stack Makers at thenewstack.io/podcasts. And take a moment, please, rate and review us on iTunes and like us and follow us on YouTube. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.